Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah ma ba'd. The question is asking here a number of questions connected to the Ihram and Umrah. We'll split them up, but the first question and second question can be put together. So he's asking here, Allah preserve him and make him of those who are successful in their pilgrimage, can he wear a small pouch where he can hold his money and phone, etc., or is that part of what is not allowed of stitched clothing when it comes to Ihram? The correct view in this, and this is the view of the majority of them, is that what is not allowed for men is anything which is stitched, which would then wrap around the limbs. The meaning of stitched clothing is anything which would be worn around the limbs. So stitched clothing meaning anything with sleeves, stitched clothing anything with legs, stitched clothing anything which wraps around your torso. That's what's meant by stitched clothing. The Ihram itself has got stitching on it. Therefore, the meaning of stitched clothing is what wraps around the limbs. If you've got a belt, then inshallah, there's no harm in that. If you've got, like a side bag, inshallah, there's no harm in that. What is not permissible is to wear, like I said, what would wrap around the limbs for men. And for women, what is not allowed is anything on the face, like the niqab, etc., or gloves. So what is not allowed for women is that which will be worn on the face or the hands. He's then asking, does the Ihram have to be white? Can it be coloured? Can it have designs and patterns on it? The majority of the ulama have said that it is recommended for a person to wear white. This is because the Messenger of Allah himself, he wore white, and he encouraged the wearing of white, and he said it's the best of your garments. And the reason as well that the ulama have given is because it reminds a person of his journey back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It reminds him of his servitude and his poverty in front of Allah. Therefore, there is some kind of significance with that. However, the scholars are agreed if he wears a black one, if he wears one with stripes, none of that affects the validity of the pilgrimage. However, what we would say is wear white, not only because it is mustahab, but because if a person was to wear another colour which is not white, then he will stand out and draw attention to himself. That in itself is not permissible. And some of the ulama have said that that's not even makruh, it's haram. So, ihram aside, imagine if a person is walking down the street and he's wearing clothes which are not the norm. That is not allowed. This is known as libas al-shuhra. And the Messenger of Allah said, Man labisa libas al-shuhra fi dunya, albasahu libas al-dhul yawm al-qiyamah. Anyone who wears clothes to stand out in the dunya, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will clothe him with the garments of disgrace and degradation, Yawm al-Qiyamah. Therefore, I would say, yes, the scholars have said that your ihram would still be valid, your pilgrimage would still be valid, but avoid it. Make sure you wear white to the best of your ability, and having a belt and a side bag, etc., none of that is prohibited, because what's not allowed is to wear stitched garments which will wrap around your limbs. One last thing though, I know this is completely out of our discussion, you've not asked it at all, but this is actually something that a lot of people kind of struggle with. What about your footwear? The Hanafis have said that it has to be something which doesn't cover the ankles in a way which would then be wrapped around your foot, because then that would resemble a shoe. And you'll find a lot of people going to extremes in this. So they will get a particular type of a flip-flop and they wouldn't wear sliders or anything like that, any other kind of sandal. The majority of the ulama have said as long as it is below your ankles. So even if you've got, trainers on, which are below your ankles, then this is fine. And this is the correct view, because the Messenger of Allah, in the same hadith where he talked about not wearing stitched clothing, he said you're allowed to wear shoes as long as they are below the ankles. You're allowed to wear khuf as long as they are below the ankles. And this is the correct view. So any kind of footwear, even if it's got stitching on it, below the ankles is fine. And it doesn't need to necessarily be flip-flops, or some of them say that a bone has to be showing, etc. None of that. is required according to the correct scholarly view. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He takes you safely and returns you safely, having benefited. Wallahu a'lam. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.